I haven't seen many videos like this on YouTube. A real-time painting critique using ChatGPT image by image. This painting is called Attack from the Trenches, Lines versus Loops. It's 30 by 30 inches and oil on canvas. I'd already spent a lot of time on it before bringing it into this process. In this video, I'll walk through the evolution of that painting and how I use ChatGPT's feedback to refine the composition, deepen the narrative, and bring more clarity to the work. The process starts by uploading a photo of the painting into ChatGPT, along with a prompt explaining what kind of feedback I'm looking for. When I sent the first image, I didn't just ask, "What do you think?" I gave ChatGPT specific priorities to respond to. For this painting, I emphasized design principles over innovation, though I still wanted room for experimentation. I also asked for suggestions that would help the piece resonate with a contemporary audience, not just formally, but emotionally. The feedback came in clearly structured: what's working, what's not, and a range of possible directions to take. I never had to follow any one path. The value is in having options and in being challenged to see the painting through a different lens. This is the first version I brought into the critique. I'd already put a lot into it, layering structure, rhythm, and color. But seeing it through another lens helped me realize that wasn't quite landing. The critique pointed out that there wasn't a clear focal point, no strong center of gravity for the eye. Many of the forms were repeated with similar weight and intensity, which made the image feel flat despite its complexity. The top and middle areas are crowded and without contrast or atmosphere. Everything was fighting for attention at the same volume. And emotionally, it lacked a sense of tension or release. It needs an event or a moment of consequence to ground it. From here, I started making choices, not to follow rules, but to build a more compelling visual and emotional structure. In this version, I started applying some of the early suggestions. I toned down the upper third of the painting, softened a few competing elements, and began working toward a clearer focal area in the lower center. These moves definitely helped. The eye had a better place to enter the painting, and the visual clutter up top started to calm down. But new issues became clear. That large purple vertical shape on the left, it had become too dominant. It wasn't connected enough to the rest of the composition, and it started to feel like a wall blocking the flow. The critique also pointed out that the emotional arc still wasn't there. The painting had structure now, but no rupture, no moment of pressure or collapse to define the scene. At this point, I was encouraged to start disrupting some of the visual repetition. I was also given options: vary the line weights to create better movement, break into the dominant shapes to add complexity, and begin building a central event, something that could hold meaning and tension. With this version, I was starting to get more control over depth. The top section was softer, the foreground loops more readable, and the composition had better flow. But the critique kept pointing to that large purple vertical form near the front, saying it was too dominant and disconnected from the rest of the painting. And here's where I'll admit something. I didn't want to touch it yet. I knew it was a problem, but I wasn't ready to break into it. Sometimes you need to sit with a shape for a while before you know what to do with it. Instead, I focused on atmosphere, fading some diagonals and trying to create more layers of space. ChatGPT suggested I start introducing a moment of emotional tension, a rupture, and keep pushing contrast between clarity and fog, sharpness and collapse. This was a key turning point, maybe the first time I truly confronted that dominant purple pillar. Instead of leaving it sealed off, I brought a set of small circles down into it, softening its edges and starting to treat it like part of the battlefield rather than a wall. It wasn't fully resolved yet. The form was still visually heavy and a little too rigid. But this edit finally addressed a critique that had come up in multiple sessions. I didn't act on it right away. I needed to wait until I had a way to do it that felt right. The circles created an entry point. The pillar started to feel more wounded, more complex, more connected to the other shapes around it. But the painting still didn't have a climax. The tension was there, the movement was forming, but it needed a defining moment, something to split the painting open, and that's what came next. This was a turning point. The yellow diagonal slash cut directly through the center, through a newly built line of hooked forms. These small hooks weren't decorative, they felt like a defensive barrier, a barbed wire front line. Just beyond that line, the forms started to shift. Loops began to tilt or invert, like they'd been struck or forced downward. One in particular, hit directly by the yellow slash, now reads like it's been knocked over, flipped upside down under pressure. And the lower right continued to break down. The composition was no longer just layered, it was reacting. This version introduces a crater in the lower right, not as a result of the yellow slash, but as a sign that this ground has been hit before, weakened by earlier events. At the same time, I faded the circle motif in the upper right. It had been drawing too much attention and competing with the slash. Toning it down gave the composition space to focus on the main conflict zone. By this point, it became clear that the energy was moving from the lower left to the upper right, a position from the looping forms toward the structured line. The yellow slash isn't the start of the attack, it's a violent response, a kind of munition, a shot across the bow fired in desperation to stall or disrupt the advancing forces. The crater adds context. The position on the right has already been struck. It might fall, or maybe it already has. In this final version, I added smoke and mist to a few areas, especially around the yellow slash and in parts of the background. That helped soften the contrast and let some shapes recede slightly into atmosphere. I also muted the lower left. It was pulling too much focus. Now it plays a quieter role in the overall composition. The result wasn't a resolution, it was a pause, like the scene had been frozen in time. You can still feel the tension between forms, the pressure along that central line. But instead of seeing an active battle, the viewer is looking at a single moment. Not the beginning, not the end, just one captured frame of a larger confrontation. That's when I knew the painting didn't need anything more. Here's the painting at the beginning and where it landed. Could I keep going? Of course. There's always the temptation to push it further, polish more, keep editing. Maybe it's already overworked. But the process helped me slow down, consider structure, contrast, rhythm, and how a viewer might interpret what's happening. I've used human critique before. This was different. I can keep going back and forth and ask as many questions as I want. It may be better, it may be worse, I'm not sure. It's just another tool, though. What surprised me was how often ChatGPT noticed subtle changes I hadn't even pointed out, and how that made me look more carefully. I didn't follow every suggestion. I didn't always agree, but even that back and forth helped me sharpen my judgment. That's what this is about, not perfection, just progress. Okay, thanks for taking the time to follow this process with me. If you want to see more of my work or read about the stories behind the paintings, you can visit my website at toddcruzart.com. I'll be sharing more experiments like this and continuing to learn piece by piece. See you next time. Bye.